Business leaders know the future is already here. The economy is shifting. Non-humans are entering the workforce. Nothing feels certain. SHRM understands those evolving challenges, both in the workplace and the wider world. In this podcast, we'll bring together authors, researchers, executives, and non-traditional experts to help you take on the challenges others haven't yet considered. Because you don't need to be a futurist, you need actionable insights now. You need to be a Tomorrowist. I'm Jerry Wan. Welcome to Tomorrowist, where we explore the trends shaping the future of work. Today, we're recording live from San Diego at SHRM 25, the world's largest HR conference. As we look ahead to the future of work, one thing is certain: change is constant. SHRM's 2025 CHRO Priorities and Perspectives report reveals that organizational design and change management emerge as a top focus area for Chief Human Resources Officers. Within this area, nearly half of CHROs identify change management strategies as their most critical priority. Joining me today to dive deeper into what it takes to lead effective change management is Glenn Anderson, professional speaker at Glenn Anderson Speaks, and an expert in helping teams overcome communication and collaboration challenges. Glenn, welcome to Tomorrowist.
Thank you, Jerry. It's great to be here.
You just wrapped up a 4-hour marathon workshop on change management here at SHRM. We're so grateful that you still had the energy and the desire to come speak to us on tomorrow. So thank you extra.
As long as I can sit down, it's fine. After a 4-hour workshop, you're correct.
We hear a lot about this phrase that change is happening faster and faster, and that seems to be even happening at a faster rates. Do you believe that to be true, or is it how we perceive this change given all the technological and other things that are happening around us?
Well, there's certainly no question that technology change is with us and probably moving faster than it ever has. And so I feel like there's a lot of focus on that because technology touches all of us in our daily lives. But when I look at business, I feel like a lot of the tenets and the organizational structures of business have not really changed that much. And so when you look at team building and teamwork and collaboration and leadership and effective meetings, the things that drive business, those really haven't changed that much. And so I think sometimes the focus too much is on fast-moving technology, and we miss the fact that a lot of how we effectively run business is not going that fast. It's not changing that fast.
And what about sort of this balance of the need for change versus continuing to stick to something that we know works, right? Because I think the expectation of new and innovative, innovation is put on a pedestal as a great thing at all times, but sometimes innovation without things backing it up or change for the sake of change isn't good. How do you balance that?
One of my favorite questions that I think always needs to be asked in the kind of situation you described is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And so much today of technology, people just grab onto it because it's exciting and shiny and new. And I always say, just take a pause here for a second. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And as you suggested in your question, often the way we're doing things is fine for a particular issue. The technology might affect something else and address something else, but we shouldn't just be changing because something's new.
In your work, you spend a lot of time talking to leaders across various organizations about change and the challenges that they face. Here in the middle of 2025, what are they saying, and then what are they looking ahead to in terms of the challenges that they think they will be facing in the future?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things they worry about. One is that top executives almost always have a good vision for their company. And that vision is often what's underlying and driving change in their organization. And they worry that that vision is not getting properly communicated to the everyday workers. And so the everyday workers just see this change coming at them, creating chaos and disruption, and they don't see the big picture vision of why. And that really upsets top executives a lot. The other thing I think they worry about is that their leadership team is too fixed mindset focused and not enough on growth mindset focused. They're afraid to take chances and they're afraid to learn from their mistakes. And I think that worries top executives because they know we have to have a growth mindset if we're really going to move forward.
How do you think about that in terms of how corporate leaders, particularly the ones that work in the publicly traded world, are judged and compensated based on short-term results, while, as you just mentioned, vision and long-term strategies are things that take more than a few quarters How do you talk to leaders, or what are they saying about that balance of how they're judged, how they're compensated versus the thing that they actually want to do?
Money just screws everything up, doesn't it? And yeah, you got to get past that. I mean, they need to look at their business, and are they bringing value to the world? Are they bringing value to the community? I mean, this is kind of a personal feeling of mine, but if you're only worried about your stock price and if it's going up and down, I think you're missing, the bigger picture of giving value to the world. So whenever I have an opportunity, I try to deliver that message that we should not just be focused on the stock price, because that's going to control the wrong things.
Change fatigue is real, or is it real? It feels like change fatigue is real from we talk about change and everything is rapidly evolving. What separates the organizations that handle it well from the ones that struggle in terms of the amount of change that they institute and the pace of change?
Yeah, this question really gets into an area that I feel very strongly about. When you introduced this session, you talked about change management, and I like to talk about change leadership, because then you're focused more on the people that are involved in the change. And so I think that's what separates those companies, is those that are focused too much on just tracking the change and the tools and the models that make the change happen, versus focusing on helping the people that are actually executing the change. I think that is a separator. That makes a difference.
And how does one is it an evolutionary step going from a change management mindset to a change leadership mindset?
It certainly is, but they're really two different things, and you need both. I mean, a complex change needs change management structures and processes and tracking and flow charts and things to make sure that change project begins and ends properly. But change leadership is necessary to help the people. And so that's where it's missing a lot, is people miss the people. And so you need both. You really need both. It's not like you're going to replace one with the other.
So let's talk about on that second topic of change leadership. It's we're trying to also perhaps measure some things like morale and attitude that can't be as easily measured as adoption rates or things on the change management angle. How do you think about ways that leaders can measure their success or their evolution in that regard of a successful change leadership operation or a mindset shift in terms of morale and how people view the change?
They really have to be tuned into the people, talking to the people, one-on-ones, hearing what the people have to say. If the leader is just kind of standing back and assuming that the change is going forth and everybody's embraced it, when in fact maybe people just tolerate it, they don't really embrace it. And so that just involves good leadership skills, right? Empathy and kindness and communicating with your team to make sure you understand where they're at.
You talked about vision. You talked about the frontline workers perhaps being focused on the small things, whereas leaders and executives must be focused on long-term vision to make sure that the ship is going right. And I think we've seen all that, right? And so when you're in a particular department, many levels down, you're asked to do one thing and it may not make sense.
Yep.
So it leads to frustrations or questions of why are we doing this or why are we making this change? The leaders upstairs don't know what we go through daily, and then on the other end, it's hey, we're trying to go that way and then change the course of a big ship, if you will.
Sure.
How can and let's talk about both angles. What do leaders wish that their workers knew, and how can leaders better demonstrate those things? And then on the other end, how can workers who may feel frustrated about what they're being asked to do without necessarily perhaps understanding the reason for that, better communicate those things up the chain?
Yeah, it really comes down to good communication, which is certainly one of the tenets of good leadership, right? Is a good leader is a good communicator up and down the chain. And so, again, if you're starting with that vision and the leader down at the team level understands that vision and makes sure that that's been communicated and that people hear what they're saying. There's an expression in communication, it's called a leak point. And that means that what you as a leader said to your team might not have been interpreted by everyone the same way. And so how do you get past that? Well, you have to ask questions and have people repeat things back and have one-on-ones with people. And that's where it all starts to fall apart, is if you're not doing that, you have not properly communicated that vision, then the people down at the worker level are in that spot you described where they're not really sure why they're doing what they're doing. I mean, the vision and communicating the vision and communicating the value of the change to the company and to the individual department and team and worker is just so important to keep the people on track and keep them excited about the change. So, it's kind of a simple answer, but it just comes back to good communication up and down the chain.
One of the biggest changes, big tectonic changes that we've seen over the last 5 years is obviously the transition to hybrid work, to remote work as a result of the pandemic. Much of it stayed, some of it is swinging back. Um, when it comes to communication, that presents more challenges not being in the same room. Now you have people in different time zones and different working styles. Everything is a virtual meeting. What are some things that are lessons or strategies that leaders can take away from what we've learned over the last 5 years in making sure that the change management and change leadership stays at a high level while the remote nature of work makes things a little bit more challenging?
Well, I would say that what you just said is the issue. And so if a company identifies that issue as you just described it, then they're well on their way to making sure that those things don't get in the way of good communication. But when you have daily Zoom meetings, team meetings on Zoom and things like this, there's things you have to do to make those effective meetings. You have to have a facilitator, make sure everybody's got their camera turned on, make sure everybody's participating. I mean, those sound like simple things, but yet that's what keeps the team cohesion and the collaboration of the team together. So focusing on the technology and how do we get past it to make it as good a situation as you can. Hybrid is tough because sometimes you have people in the office and you have people working at home. And there's a hierarchy there that the people in the office are often thought of as one or two clicks higher than the people working at home. And that has to be overcome. And so if management understands that, if a facilitator or a Zoom meeting understands that, then that helps that become a more collaborative environment. And you were right on. I mean, that kind of thing could get in the way of a change initiative when the message is not being delivered and it's being lost because of a hybrid work environment. So there has to be really a special focus on that.
Talk to us about your perspective and what you're seeing in the world, what you're hearing from leaders on the impact of artificial intelligence or AI-enabled change as it almost makes things change quicker or change in a different way, right? There are many workers who are fearful or concerned about their job being there. Processes are changing. There's constant talk in the media about, repetitive tasks being taken away and then being replaced by robots, real robots and, metaphorical robots. How does that change into your expertise and what you're hearing and what should leaders be focused on? Is it, signing up for the latest AI tool that comes in because it could save time, efficiency, or is it, as you mentioned before, just being more mindful of what works, what doesn't? Tell us about the balance that leaders must make.
What my feeling about AI is that AI can tell you about things that already happened, but AI can't really tell me what I'm thinking going forward. And so I feel like when people get worried about AI taking away their job, okay, fine. AI can digest what's already happened and make sense of that, perhaps give you feedback on that. But AI doesn't know what I'm thinking right now. And so if I'm going to be a valuable employee, if I'm going to bring vision to my team, I'm not worried about AI doing that. AI can't do that. ODI can do that. And when I run into people that are worried about the future of their job, AI is going to take it away and whatnot, that's always a thought that I try to put into their mind. But just like any technology, there's value there and it can help people do your job better. And again, I mean, I worked at IBM for many, many years. I've been focused on technology for a long time. And there's good and bad in technology. And so you take what's good and use it to help you do your job better rather than focused on, oh, it's going to make all the jobs go away. I just sometimes think that's a little crazy.
What are some ways that technology can be used for good in terms of building better change leaders?
Well, if there's technology that helps with communication, that is certainly at the top of my list. If there's technology that helps a team collaborate better, if it helps you brainstorm better, I mean, there's, apps that do all these things that are very helpful. And so I think as you're trying to put together a collaborative, trust-based, open communication team, if you can find technology that makes it easier for you to do that, especially in the hybrid environment, as you mentioned, if some people are out here and other people are over here, can we bring those ideas together with technology to keep it a collaborative environment? So certainly communication, collaboration, apps in the technology world can help do that better.
Let's pivot away as far away from AI as I think we can. Um, you've studied improv comedy, and obviously you're an eloquent, elaborate speaker. Um, what benefits have you experienced in your role as a speaker, as a trainer, as it relates to the skills and the things that you learn in improv? And then share with us what leaders can learn, or should they sign up for improv classes? What have you learned about how that can make you a better communicator and a leader?
Yeah, there's kind of two things there. One is just the stage presence kind of thing. And if you want to be a person that feels comfortable standing on stage, being comfortable in front of an audience, and maybe especially being comfortable without a script in front of you, which improv actors have no script, then going to an improv class, getting in an informal kind of improv troupe, learning the games and the techniques, that could be great. The other side of it is the foundation of actors doing improv on stage is an expression called yes and. You've probably heard that before. It's pretty well known. Yes, I hear what you're saying, and now I'm going to add to it. That's how improv actors keep an improv scene going when there is no script. And I tell leaders all the time that that is a tenet of good collaboration. If you want a collaborative team, you should not have people running around saying no to everything, saying yes, but, which kind of cuts off the conversation. You want a team that thinks yes and. I acknowledge what you've said, and now I'm going to make my reply, offer my opinion, build on it, whatever. That's the respectful way to do it. And if you want to learn that, do some improv, because you're not going to survive on an improv stage with no planning, no rehearsal, no script, unless you know how to play that game of yes and back and forth. So it was very valuable to me. And one of the things I do today as a professional speaker is take all that neat stuff I learned in improv and combine it with corporate and the business world to deliver some of the things we're talking about here today.
If leaders don't have the time or don't want to take improv classes, what are some of the things that they can practice in their daily lives to be, as you mentioned, more collaborative minded? The yes and technique is fantastic because it never ends the conversation, right? It just keeps it open, right? It keeps it open to possibilities. Are there some things that leaders can do in their own time to learn?
Well, no one likes the curmudgeon that thinks it's their job to just say no to everything. So I think any leader can kind of take that on themselves and try to practice not saying no. Leaders want to be curious. We're going to hear from Ted Lasso later on today here at SHRM, and he has an expression. He says, "Be curious, not judgmental." And I think that a leader could practice that as well. When you go into a meeting, when you go into a session, when you're talking with folks, be the leader that is curious. What do you think? What do you think? How could we be doing this different, rather than the leader that's judgmental? So, and there's a ton of books on this subject. If a leader doesn't have time to go to an improv class, you can find some really great books that explain this kind of thing with some little exercises that you can do. And so that's what I would encourage them to just take some of those improv tenets and just practice them. Just practice them at home with your kids, practice them on the job. I think it'd be very helpful.
And I think one of the things about improv too is that you have to engage the audience, right? Whether they're the ones throwing ideas at you, or you have to be a master at reading the room, as they say. And those are wonderful, those are such beneficial and wonderful things that the leaders must do, because if you're just talking at somebody, if you're just, just reading off a script, as you said, it's not a conversation. It is just a directive, right? And so in terms of reacting, there seems to be, and we talked about this a little bit, and I want you to go a little bit further, fire drills where every problem seems to warrant a reaction versus keeping the course and keeping directive on what is important or what the change leadership mission is, what do leaders need to do to make sure that they're making the right choice in reactive sense or staying the course?
Part of the reason they became a leader is they're smart people. So hopefully they can look at some situations in front of them and identify what's more important and what's less important. And then once they have made that decision, then they need to be able to properly communicate that. Again, I think is the more important thing. And so the workers, the workforce, the teams, they look at that situation and they have their own feelings on it. So the leader steps forward and says, based on my experience, my knowledge, my leadership skill, this is a fire that shouldn't have happened in the first place. This is a fire that we're going to quickly put out. This is one that takes some work, and we're going to really have to drill down and figure out what's going on here.
Yeah.
So the leader takes their knowledge, but then it takes the skill of communicating that knowledge so that the workforce, the teams understand what's important and what's not.
As we sit here at SHRM 25, in the middle of 25, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, right? Here and abroad. And all of it impacts how we show up to work. That added to the everyday stresses and challenges that leaders face in making decisions and implementing change and managing their workforce. And that naturally can take a toll on a leader's mental health. What should leaders be doing more to take care of themselves so that they can show up better for their people?
Yeah, I think besides what you just described, one of the things that can really wear a leader down is when they realize that their team, their people are worried about those things or worried about something going on in the business perhaps. And so finding out what are they worried about rather than just kind of standing back and understanding that people are worried. Okay, fine, they're worried, but let's figure out what's their background. Everybody has a different background. Everybody has different life experiences. So what is causing the consternation on this team or with some of my leaders? And if it is the world at large, are we asking leaders today to be counselors?
Right.
Kind of help people get past that maybe a little bit, but more focused on the inside the business part. What's bothering you? There's this big change initiative coming. Do you have the skill that you need? Do you have the resources that you need? What is it that's causing you anxiety?
Yeah.
I think a good leader that shows kindness and empathy figures that out and then figures out what can be done about it.
I know there's a very famous TV show that a lot of people are talking about where the premise of the show is that you completely separate yourself from work and personal life. But anybody who's worked a day in their lives or just lives life know that it's literally not reality. It's a TV show. But it also gives us a lot of things to think about, right? As you watch that show or the media like it, we cannot not bring those things to work. And so a good leader, particularly somebody who is led or charged with creating change or managing change, I think has to understand that there's going to be complexity. There's going to be left turns, zigzags all over the place. What is one thing that leaders can be thinking about today? I know we're talking about the concept of change, but how can they prepare better today so that they can be a better change maker and a better change leader tomorrow?
Well, again, I come back to this phrase I used before of change leadership, which is focused on the people that are being led through the change. Change management, which a lot of leaders would focus on, to me has a beginning and an end. It might be more project oriented. But if you're doing a good job of teaching and creating a change leadership environment, it's almost like you're planting seeds that will be there continuously to help teams in the long run, not just on this little change project from point A to point B, but are they more agile? Are they more flexible? Have they been prepared to handle the chaos and the distractions that'll certainly come their way? And change leadership says, I'm going to build that as a long-term thing, not a short thing with a beginning and end. And I think any company today, that's what they need to be doing, is planting those seeds of change leadership, which is a long-term strategy for change success.
Glenn, thank you so much for making time for us. I know you had a long day here at SHRM, and we've learned so much about change management, change leadership, and how we can all show up better as we navigate our organizations. And so thank you for joining us on Tomorrowist.
Thank you very much, Jerry. It's been my pleasure.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, Please subscribe to Tomorrowist wherever you get your podcast. We also publish a weekly newsletter with in-depth articles and the latest SHRM research to help keep you in the know about the trends shaping the future of work. You can subscribe and find all of our episodes on our website at shrm.org/Tomorrowist. Thanks for listening. And remember, the workplace is changing rapidly. You don't have to be a futurist, be a Tomorrowist.
SHRM.